the Babylonians would literally infuse their understanding, like we read from Jubilees chapter 8, when they learned this stuff from the rebellious watchers from before the flood. They would literally watch the stars and the sun, moon, and stars and look for omens in order to determine how they worship their gods. This is what we're warned from in Deuteronomy 4:19. Don't do this. Don't do this. So I'm not saying William Lane Craig is actually doing this, but he's explaining the process. And I just showed you the literal verses where those should be triggered in his mind to understand this process that I'm explaining. It's called false religion. This is called a false system. This is literally the process by which the creator said, don't do this. This is not right. This is not, and he's literally trying to say the biblical description given by the creator is incorrect because he's leaning on the weight of Babylon's system of interpreting their religion and the stars above. I'm blown away. I'm blown away, guys. I'm trying not to get too loud and make the mic peak, but pray for me.
What's going on here?
Oh, sir, I'm arrested.
Guys, real quick, just want to let you know what they're doing is they're looking at a blog that they printed out and they're reading from. So I couldn't find the source of the blog that they're reading, but they stumbled across some Christian who wrote a blog basically talking about the firmament. And in his blog, he's upset at the church because he realizes that the scriptures do in fact describe an enclosed cosmology, enclosed by a firmament specifically. And that the writer of the blog is upset because he realizes growing up in church, he was never explained this. And he's kind of mad because it would matter. Like the person writing the blog, it matters so much to him that he's upset no one ever explained this. Why would that matter? Well, it's because that's a person trying to reason through his faith. And if you don't have the backdrop that the Bible actually explains to you, and then you find out the backdrop when you're 25 or 30 years old and trying to defend your faith amongst a world of lies, well, people are going to, like they do, they make fun of biblical cosmology because it's contrary to what we've been taught from NASA our entire life in this modern age. So as a result of that, a believer has to make a choice. Are they going to believe what the Bible clearly says, or what they can believe what the world tells them? And that's where your faith comes in. That's where you're digging into, is the scriptures real? What do they claim, and can they be tested? What is the world claiming? And when we test it, what happens? So this is where, just in case you guys are wondering the setup to why they're even having this conversation, they found a blog that someone wrote. Unfortunately, I would love to source it in the video description, but I couldn't find, they didn't provide it in their video. I couldn't find who wrote it and where it came from, but they're addressing this Christian who wrote a blog who's angry that he just learned the Bible does in fact specifically teach an enclosed cosmology. And so they're going to address it now.
It's very evident reading Alex's blog that he resents not having been told about these matters in his Christian upbringing, in his church. He complains that Christians are not taught about these things. He says it was never taught from other Christians. He said probably they themselves were unaware of the verses in the Bible that teach about the firmament because nobody ever taught them about it either. And so I think there's a certain resentment that's coming to the surface here, that he feels somehow the wool has been pulled over his eyes, and that now he's seeing for the first time this antiquated, allegedly ancient Near Eastern view of the world that you have described. And I think the good news for Alex,
antiquated, alleged Near Eastern view. Just keep that in mind as we go. You got to listen to how they frame this stuff, guys. This guy's he's someone that has done debates all of his life. Okay, he is a master orator. He knows exactly what he's saying and how he sets up what he's about to say. So just keep in mind what he just said.
Is that what Christian Old Testament scholars have done a very good job of doing, is showing that the Old Testament does not indeed teach a flat disc-shaped earth covered by a solid dome known as the firmament, and moreover that neither do the ancient Near Eastern views of the world embody such a mythical conception. So he's simply incorrect in thinking that people are sweeping things under the rug rather than exploding a false view of the ancient world and of Genesis 1. In these ancient Babylonian myths, you have the description of stone heavens like layers above the earth, and the stars are inscribed in the lowest of these heavens. But clearly, these myths were not understood by the Babylonians literally.
Yeah, okay. Listen to what he just said. He just said he's not even talking about Genesis. He's not going to. Spoiler alert, he's not going to talk about Genesis at all. He's just going to talk about Babylonian cosmology. And he just admitted that they did believe in a multi-layered tier heaven that was considered like stonework above them. But then he goes on to try to say, but they didn't believe that. And this is what he's going to talk about. So we're going to jump into it.
Because that would be in contradiction to the constant motion of the fixed stars, as well as the sun and the moon, across the sky. These ancient Mesopotamian astronomers were meticulous in their observation of the heavens and were able to compound star charts that would predict the return of the fixed stars to their exact locations year after year.
Okay, guys. What he's doing now is he's actually, and I'm not stopping because I know there's a lot of intelligent people in my audience that are very good at reading and listening. But he has a specific cadence that he does with his debates that some people complain about, because he not only uses a lot of large academic scholarly words, but he has a specific cadence that puts some people to sleep. Okay, so I'm trying to make sure everyone's following as we go. Okay, there's a wide variety of people in the audience, and what he's basically saying at this point, he's attacking Babylonian cosmology to say, even though they claim that there was literally a bricked dome above them with multiple layers, very similar to what was described in the Hebrew scriptures, he's like, they didn't really mean that, because they had all these star charts about the sun, moon, and stars in this cosmology that circled above them, and he's gonna equate that to thinking the dome is spinning above them. So he's building his first straw man onto his second straw man onto the first straw man. So he still doesn't know, like, all the descriptions we have of the actual stars and the sun, moon, how they revolve around us in the creation model. This is greatly explained in chapter 72 through 85 of First Enoch. It's also in Psalm 19, verse 1 through 6. We're going to go over that in a minute. And he doesn't know any of that, apparently, because now he's going off another straw man to claim that if what the Babylonians were saying were correct and they had these star charts that moved in the heavens above us, well, then we can't be stationary, because the stars are stationary and we're not. You see how that logic doesn't compute? Because what he's doing is what we've done. We've seen people do this a 1,000-fold over every time we try to have this conversation with people with a lot of cognitive dissonance that believes what the devil has told them about cosmology for over 100 years now. That the first thing they do to try to figure out the shape of the ground that they live on, instead of going to the scriptures, they look to the sky. And they're like, well, all those things look like little dots, and it must be circular, and things look round, like when we stare at the wandering stars, like Mars and Venus, and they all look round. Things look round. We must be round. Guys, that's the most silly logic. That's not logic. That is not scientific observational logic. That's not going to the scriptures to see what does God describe so that you understand what you're looking at. So he's basically looking to the sky to try to validate that he lives on a ball.
And would chart the eclipses of the moon and of the sun and the motion of the planets with regard to these fixed stars. And that is incompatible with the modern assumption that the ancient Mesopotamians thought of the heavens as a dome-like structure with the stars embodied in the dome. Such
Oh, really? Okay, guys, y'all ready? Babylonian cosmology. Um, let's just go to one of their most famous images of Babylonian cosmology, and here we got an actual domed world with multiple layers. This has actually got 7 layers. Oh, I wonder where they got that idea right off the boat with Noah. I wonder where they got that idea. Let's go to another depiction found from ancient hieroglyphs of Babylonian cosmology. Oh, look, it's domed. What do you know? It's enclosed. How about we just look at, here's the Babylonian cosmology there. We go over to their neighbors, the Greeks, and they believed it was domed as well. How about the Persians? That's literally just next door to Babylon, to the Chaldeans. The Persians, they believed it was domed as well. The ancient Indians to the east, they believed it was domed. The Japanese as well. The Mayans across the ocean believed it was domed. The Incans, the Hebrews right next door, literally the same descendants of Shem, they taught it was domed because they literally got off the boat from Noah and they knew where the water came from. Guys, the Celts, the Chinese, the Africans, the Sumerians. The Sumerians literally is Chaldean Babylonian cosmology. The Australians as well. It's just a strange depiction. The Chumash, the Masonic Freemasons across the world. They know it's domed. Islamic cosmology believes it's domed. Roman, Egyptian cosmology, even though theirs is very artistically depicted with this woman that's in blue that is kind of hanging over the earth and supporting the earth. That is the waters of the firmament from their artistic depiction. Now, what's unique about all these ancient biblical cosmological models is that they are a little different from the proper Hebrew cosmology. Because why? Well, because they were working off the same fundamental concept, which is an enclosed cosmology with the creator and angelic beings living above, but they had their little twists on it. Why? Because the enemy's always been trying to twist the scriptures. It's been twisted so far. So the original twist, a couple hundred years off the boat, was that we live in enclosed. We know that the actual heaven is an actual solid firmament that's above us, but the creator that Noah told you to worship, that's not really it. It's really all these other gods that we have, these family of gods that we have over here, we made idols of. Go worship those. Those are the creators of the heavens and the earth. So you see, right off the boat, they took some similar premises and they started twisting the cosmology right off the boat. But we've now come thousands of years where they just went full-fledged to saying that whole cosmological structure of an entire structure of a house with multiple layers, they've gone to say, now that's not real. In fact, we're going to make up a new cosmology. So this is where we have what was called an evolutionary heliocentric cosmology today. So, and of course, they try to push that cosmology with quote unquote science, falsely so called. And this is where you get a lot of just con man art, right? You get a lot of I can't think of the right word, guys. It gets my blood pressure up. It's crazy. You get all the shenanigans we see through the space agencies across the world, right? Where they're all the different stuff we see. You see them on wires and ISS. You see with bad CGI that's morphing into other CGI because they're literally in a soundstage with a blue screen behind them. You see that they never turn the camera around to show you the fourth wall because they're literally in a soundstage or in the pool. You see bubbles coming out of their masks and their helmets. You see all kinds of nonsense to show you they're not doing what they say they're doing, and they're taking $60 million a day from us, from the United States at least. I don't know what the budget is for these space agencies in other countries. The point is they have to push a false cosmology because they've got other plans for that fundamental idea later, okay, which requires you to not understand what the creator made, which is a enclosed cosmology. So the point is, if we have this guy saying that he's not even properly representing what the ancient people talked about, much less the scriptures. He hasn't used the scripture and he won't yet, but we're going to get to some scriptures because that's what we do on this channel is we do the scriptures. So let's keep going a little bit.
A dome could not move if it were resting on the earth. And yet they did observe the stars to move across the sky. Moreover, in the ancient text called the astrolabs, which are these ancient Babylonian astronomical texts, they describe the motion of the planets, which they called bibu, or wild sheep, because of the way they would wander in contradiction to the fixed stars. They knew the planets Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn from their observations. And they noticed that these stars moved with a kind of zigzag motion across the heavens and across the paths of the fixed stars. So you couldn't possibly have a dome, even a revolving dome, in which these things were moving across our visual horizon, because it would be impossible for the planets to move back and forth across the paths of the fixed stars in that way.
Okay, because I don't have all the graphics ready. I don't have all the GIFs ready or the images, the video overlays, because I just don't have enough time in the day. But if I did, this would be the moment where I insert a graphic of someone just like dumping out a box of straws on somebody else. Because that's all we're getting right now. Is all this is a straw man setup for him to try to dismantle not even the scriptures, but a neighboring pagan cosmological model. So it's just super frustrating that this guy's trying to speak for Christian academia. But guess what? We're going to get to an actual Hebrew ancient Semitic scholar here in a minute who vastly disagrees with William Lane Craig.
So these ancient Babylonian texts just explode the idea that these ancient thinkers believed that there was a solid dome over the earth in which the stars were inscribed. In his blog, Alex says that when he attended Christian private school, we were taught that scientists in the ancient times were the ones who thought the earth was flat. Never mind that science did not exist there. He's wrong on both counts. It was ancient science that taught that the stars and the planets move, and that did not believe in a kind of fixed dome resting on the horizon over the earth. And science most certainly did exist. Ancient Babylonian mathematics and astronomy were the origins of science. Francesca Rochberg is a philosopher and historian of science at the University of California, Irvine. And she points out in her book, The Heavenly Writing, that Babylonian astronomy did not rely upon or even make use of geometrical models for the motion of a celestial body around the earth. I quote, "The lack of an explicit cosmological model within which Babylonian astronomical theory was to fit was of no consequence in view of the fact that the predictions did not derive from a geometrical conception that attempted to make causal sense of the phenomena, but rather depended on period relations, that is to say, the times during which the stars would return to their former positions, whose purpose was to enable the computation of phenomena, to predict celestial phenomena like eclipses, either forward or backward in time in an instrumental way."
So guys, he's literally quoting from somebody else who's not a biblical author, just some lady who's another professor. So our first actual citation that he brings to the table is not from scripture. He's not addressing Genesis. He's not going to address Genesis. And I'm so sad. I've watched this guy in the past. I've watched him go, have debates on certain ideas and do wonderfully. But this just shows you what happens when you run into something that he's endured a lifetime of brainwashing by our society to get him to disbelieve Genesis, the very first chapter of the book that he has founded his career upon. And it's just heartbreaking. It's truly heartbreaking, guys. And he's basically trying to say right now, in case you didn't catch what he read, he's basically trying to say that this other scholar is claiming that the ancient cosmological star charts of the ancient Babylonians and how they would predict certain movements of the stars. I'm sitting here going, dude, that's First Enoch. It literally tells you which quarter the stars come and go, and there's actual angels in charge of these specific regions, and the year's broken up into 4 quarters, and these stars come out here and these stars come there. Like it's a full-on analytical breakdown for you to tell you how the stars move and the sun and moon. So he's ignoring all that, and he's going to go with some other person who knows if she's even a believer or not. Who knows where she is pulling her information, her conclusion, but he just reads her conclusion, and that's his proof text citation, the very first, after we're 9 minutes in, and it has nothing to do with scripture. It's just literally someone else's opinion on how the ancient Babylonians did not believe in literal cosmology, but yet they just were doing simple instrumental computations to determine a regularity of how the stars moved. It's very difficult for me.
In other words,
my ears are
ancient
hurting.
Babylonian science or astronomy was purely instrumentalist, Kevin, in its orientation. It only focused on making accurate predictions. It didn't have a physical model of the cosmos or of the heavens. That there was no part of it. In fact, Rochberg.
Yeah, I just showed you the pictures where it did, and he literally said, this is where he contradicts himself. In his opening statement about Babylonian cosmology, he says, yes, they had a depiction of us literally like a bricked firmament over us.